I was holding the deed to a $1.2 million lakefront cottage in Muskoka, my retirement gift for my daughter Christine, when an unknown number called me at 7:43 inches the morning. The voice on the other end said only 6 words: "Don't sign the company over. Run." I thought it was some kind of sick joke. I called back immediately. The woman who answered was someone I hadn't spoken to in 18 years. What she told me in that 12-minute phone call shattered everything I believed about my only child. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or province in the comments below. Whether you're in Vancouver, Toronto, Halifax, or anywhere else in this beautiful country, I want to hear from you. One quick note. While this story contains some fictionalized elements crafted for storytelling and reflection, the lessons about family betrayal and the price of trust are very real. Some details have been adjusted for privacy, but the truth at its core remains. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The deed felt heavy in my hands. $1. $2 million for a cottage on Lake Muskoka, 4 bedrooms, private dock, the kind of place Margaret and I had dreamed about for 40 years, but could never afford until I was nearly 60. Now, at 68, I was giving it to my daughter Christine as a gift for taking over the family business. I stood in my office at Pemberton Forestry Solutions, looking out at the Vancouver Harbor. 43 years ago, I'd arrived in this city from a small town in Saskatchewan with nothing but $200 and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. I started as a sawmill worker, then a foreman, then a supervisor. By 35, I'd saved enough to buy my first logging operation. Now I owned the largest independent forestry consulting firm in British Columbia, with contracts across Western Canada. Not bad for a farm kid who used to hitchhike to school because his family couldn't afford a second vehicle. The October sun was setting over the mountains, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Christine would love this cottage. She'd been working at the company for 12 years, learning every aspect of the business. Her husband Martin had joined 5 years ago, handling our IT infrastructure. They were the future of Pemberton Forestry Solutions. Margaret would have been proud. My wife passed 6 years ago, cancer that took her in 8 months. She never got to see Christine step into leadership, never got to meet her grandson Lucas, now 4 years old. But she'd understand this gift. It wasn't just generosity. It was my way of saying I'm sorry for all those weekends I spent in logging camps instead of at home. It was an apology for missing Christine's dance recitals, her volleyball games, her university graduation because I was negotiating contracts in Prince George. The retirement ceremony was scheduled for next Saturday. 10 days away, I'd sign over 60% of the company to Christine, keep 40% as a silent partner, and finally take the retirement Margaret had begged me to consider before she got sick. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ontario area code. I answered without thinking. Harold Pemberton. A woman's voice. Older. Hesitant. "Mr. Pemberton, don't sign the company over. Run." "Who is this?" "Someone who owes you the truth." "I'll call back tonight at 9. Please answer." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Called back immediately. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. By the 7th attempt, my hands were shaking. The sensible part of my brain, the part that had negotiated $100 million contracts without flinching, insisted this was a prank. Wrong number. Someone's idea of a joke. But that other voice, the instinct that had guided me through 4 decades of business, whispered something different. I forced myself to focus on the retirement paperwork. Everything was in order. The cottage deed, the share transfer documents, the new corporate structure that would make Christine the CEO and majority owner of Pemberton Forestry Solutions. Thomas Whitfield, my attorney for 25 years, had reviewed everything. At 8:47 p.m., I sat in my home office in West Vancouver, watching the minutes tick by. The house felt emptier than usual. 6 years since Margaret passed, and I still expected to hear her footsteps in the hallway. At exactly 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Same Ontario number. "Mr. Pemberton, this is Sandra Okonkwo." The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Sandra Okonkwo, my former head accountant. The woman I'd trusted with every financial detail of my company for 15 years, until I discovered she'd been covering up embezzlement by another employee. I'd fired them both in 2007, 18 years ago. Sandra had tried to explain, tried to show me evidence that she'd been manipulated, but I hadn't listened. I'd been too angry, too betrayed. "Sandra, after 18 years, I know you have no reason to trust me. You fired me, and honestly, You had every right to be suspicious. But I need you to hear what I discovered. Her voice cracked. I've spent the last 18 years rebuilding my life. I work for a forensic accounting firm in Toronto now. 3 weeks ago, I was reviewing financial documents for a client, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. My hand tightened around the phone. What did you see? A shell company called Northern Heritage Holdings. It was created 8 months ago in Alberta. The beneficial owners are hidden behind layers of corporate structures, but I traced them. She paused. Mr. Pemberton, your daughter Christine and her husband Martin are the true owners. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. Christine would never. There's more. Northern Heritage Holdings has been in negotiations with a Chinese forestry conglomerate called Evergreen Pacific Group. They're planning to sell Pemberton Forestry Solutions to them within 60 days of your retirement. Sell my company? The share transfer specifically prohibits. The documents you're going to sign have been altered. I've seen copies. They look identical to legitimate share transfer agreements, but the language has been changed. You won't be retaining 40% as a silent partner. You'll be signing over 100% ownership with no restrictions on resale. I felt dizzy. How did you get these documents? My firm was hired by Evergreen Pacific to do due diligence on the acquisition. They sent us the share transfer agreements to verify. Mr. Pemberton, the sale price is $47 million for a company worth at least $85 million. Your daughter and her husband are going to pocket $47 million and leave you with nothing. That can't be right. Christine has worked beside me for 12 years. She loves this company. There's something else. Sandra's voice dropped. Do you remember why you fired me in 2007? You were covering up for James Whitmore. He embezzled nearly $400,000 before I caught him. I wasn't covering for him. I discovered what he was doing and I was gathering evidence to report him. But he found out and framed me, made it look like I was his accomplice. She paused. I've never stopped trying to clear my name. And 3 months ago, I finally found proof of what really happened. James Whitmore forged documents to frame me. He was the sole embezzler. Why are you telling me this now? Because James Whitmore is Martin's father. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of my desk. Martin Chen, your daughter's husband, was born Martin Whitmore. He legally changed his name in 2012, 5 years before he met Christine. His father James spent 4 years in prison for the embezzlement, got out in 2011, and died of a heart attack in 2015. But before he died, he told Martin everything. He told him that you had ruined their family, that you had destroyed his career and reputation, that you had fired an innocent woman to cover your own mistakes. That's not what happened. James stole from me. I had proof. I know. But James convinced his son that you were the villain, and Martin has spent the last 8 years executing a revenge plan. Sandra's voice hardened. He met Christine deliberately at a young professionals networking event in 2017. He pursued her specifically because she was your daughter. Their entire relationship, their marriage, their son, it's all been part of his plan to take everything you built. I couldn't speak. My daughter's wedding day flashed through my mind. Christine in her white dress, Martin's hand in hers, both of them smiling. That was 7 years ago. Had it all been a lie? I'm sending you the documents I've gathered. Financial records, the altered share agreements, emails between Martin and contacts at Evergreen Pacific. But Mr. Pemberton, you need to act fast. The retirement ceremony is in 10 days. Once you sign those papers, it's over. Why are you helping me? I fired you. I didn't believe you when you said you were innocent. Sandra was quiet for a long moment. Because for 18 years, I've carried the shame of being called a thief when I wasn't. I lost my career, my reputation, my marriage. I had to start over from nothing at 43 years old. Her voice broke. James Whitmore destroyed my life, and now his son is trying to destroy yours. I won't let that happen. Not when I have the power to stop it. The call ended. I sat in the darkness of my office, staring at the framed photo on my desk. Christine at her university graduation, both of us beaming, her arm around my shoulders. She'd hugged me tight and said, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." What happened between that moment and today? My email pinged. Sandra had sent the documents. I spent the next 4 hours reading through them, and with each page, my heart broke a little more. Saturday morning came too early. I'd barely slept 3 hours before I was tearing through my home office files, searching for the papers Martin had asked me to review over the past 2 years. Just routine updates to the corporate structure. Dad, nothing major, just some tax optimization strategies. Thomas approved all of this. No need to read through everything. I'd trusted him. I trusted my daughter. And I'd signed page after page without reading carefully. Because why would my own family try to steal from me? Now I found the copies. Hidden among legitimate documents were authorizations I didn't remember agreeing to. A power of attorney giving Martin authority over certain financial decisions. A preliminary agreement allowing Northern Heritage Holdings to negotiate on behalf of Pemberton Forestry Solutions. Transfer authorizations that I must have signed while discussing hockey scores or weekend plans. My own signature stared back at me. Harold Pemberton, signed and dated over the past 18 months. Dozens of documents, each one a piece of the trap they'd built around me. I called my attorney, Thomas Whitfield, at 7 a.m. Thomas, I need you in my office in 1 hour. It's urgent. Then I called Marcus Williams, a private investigator I'd used for background checks on potential business partners. Marcus, I need deep background on 2 people, and I need it by tomorrow morning. Who are we looking at? My son-in-law and my daughter. The silence on the other end told me Marcus understood exactly how serious this was. By Saturday afternoon, I'd made the hardest phone call of my life. I sat in Thomas Whitfield's downtown Vancouver office, spreading documents across his conference table. Thomas, I need you to review every document I've signed in the past 2 years related to corporate structure, share transfers, or financial authorizations. Thomas's face grew more troubled with each document I showed him. Harold, I didn't prepare most of these. The formatting looks like my office's work, but I've never seen these specific agreements. Someone forged documents to look like they came from you. It appears so. This power of attorney, this preliminary sales agreement, none of these went through my office. He looked up at me. Who had access to your signing privileges and my document templates? Martin handles our IT systems. He would have access to everything digital. Thomas pulled up something on his laptop. Northern Heritage Holdings. Let me run a search. His expression darkened. Incorporated in Calgary 8 months ago. The directors are listed as Christine Pemberton Chen and Martin Chen. My daughter's name is on it? As a 50% owner. Thomas turned the screen toward me. Harold, this isn't just Martin. Christine is equally involved. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Part of me had been hoping, praying, that Christine was a victim too. That Martin had manipulated her. That she didn't know what was happening. But her name on those incorporation documents destroyed that hope. There's more. Thomas pulled up another file. The altered share transfer agreement you were planning to sign next Saturday. The original language I drafted gave you 40% ownership with restrictions on resale. This version transfers 100% ownership with no restrictions whatsoever. They switched the documents. Expertly done. The only way to catch it would be to compare line by line, which no one would do for documents prepared by their own attorney. Thomas shook his head. Except I didn't prepare this version. Someone recreated my work and changed the key provisions. My phone buzzed. Marcus Williams, the investigator. Mr. Pemberton, I've got preliminary findings. You're going to want to sit down for this. I'm sitting. Go ahead. Martin Chen, born Martin James Whitmore in 1,989 inches, Edmonton. Father James Whitmore, convicted of embezzlement in 2007, served 4 years, died 2015. Martin legally changed his name in 2012 after graduating from university. He specifically chose Chen because it's his mother's maiden name and because, according to a former roommate I tracked down, it would help him blend in and no one would connect him to his father's crimes. What else? He met your daughter at a Vancouver Young Professionals event in March 2017. But here's the thing. I found his calendar from that period, backed up on an old cloud account he forgot to delete. He had entries for 3 months before that event researching your company, your daughter's social media, her favorite restaurants and hobbies. He didn't meet her by chance. He targeted her. I closed my eyes. And Christine? This is where it gets complicated. She's not innocent, but I'm not sure she understood the full scope at first. Based on financial records I've accessed, she started receiving payments from Northern Heritage Holdings about 18 months ago. Small amounts at first, then larger. She's been building a separate investment portfolio worth approximately $3 million, all hidden from you. My daughter has been stealing from me for 18 months, not directly from the company. From the anticipated proceeds of the sale. She's been taking advances against the $47 million Evergreen Pacific agreed to pay. Is there evidence she knows about Martin's history? About his father? I'm working on that. But Mr. Pemberton, there's one more thing. Martin's mother, James Whitmore's widow, she's still alive. She lives in a care home in Edmonton. I made some calls, pretended to be doing a welfare check. She has dementia now, but the staff told me Martin visits every month. And apparently, he talks about finishing what his father started and making things right for the family. I hung up and turned to Thomas. I need you to prepare new documents. A revised will leaving everything to charity. An emergency injunction to freeze Northern Heritage Holdings. And I need you to contact the RCMP about fraud charges. Are you certain you want to go this far? Criminal charges against your own daughter? I thought about Christine at 5 years old, giggling as I pushed her on the swing set in our backyard. Christine at 16, crying on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. Christine at 28, beaming as she walked down the aisle toward Martin. She made her choice. Now I have to make mine. Sunday evening arrived with the weight of everything I now knew. Christine had invited me to dinner at my own house, my West Vancouver home, for a pre-retirement family celebration. I smiled when I opened the door. The performance had begun. Christine arrived with Martin and little Lucas. I hugged my grandson tightly, wondering if he had any idea what his parents were planning. He was 4 years old, innocent, a victim in all of this. Over dinner, Martin talked enthusiastically about the transition plans. We've been thinking about expanding into the American market, Harold. Pacific Northwest operations could double our revenue. Sounds ambitious. I kept my voice neutral. Christine smiled, that sweet smile I'd known for 38 years. Dad, have you thought about what you'll do with all your free time? You've worked so hard for so long. You deserve to relax. Retirement is a big adjustment. I suppose I'll travel, maybe volunteer somewhere. Martin leaned forward. You know, we were thinking about the cottage in Muskoka. It's such a generous gift, but honestly, it might be too much house for just you. Have you considered selling it and using the proceeds for something more practical? They were already counting my assets, already planning what to liquidate. I'll think about it. Later, while helping Christine clear the dishes, I excused myself to use the washroom. In the hallway, I activated my phone's voice recorder and set it on the bookshelf near the kitchen, then closed the bathroom door loudly. Through my phone app, I heard everything. Martin's voice, low and confident. He suspects nothing. Did you see how he looked at Lucas? He's so desperate for family connection that he'll sign anything we put in front of him. Christine's voice, cold in a way I'd never heard before. He was never there for me growing up. Always off in some logging camp, missing everything important. Now he thinks a fancy cottage makes up for decades of absence? 10 more days, and this is all ours. The sale to Evergreen is already approved on their end. $47 million, Christine. We'll never have to work again. My father built an $85 million company, and we're selling it for 47? Don't get greedy. 47 million clean, no inheritance taxes, no waiting for him to die. And after the way his family treated mine, I'd sell it for half that just to watch him lose everything. Your father made his own choices, Martin. My father made a mistake, one mistake, and Harold Pemberton destroyed him for it. Destroyed my mother too. She had to go back to work at 60, waitressing until her mind started going. Do you know what it's like watching your mother forget your name because the stress of poverty accelerated her dementia? I know, baby. I know. Harold deserves this. He threw away people like they were nothing. My father, that accountant, Sandra, anyone who threatened his precious company. Now it's his turn to be thrown away. What about Lucas? He loves his grandfather. Lucas is 4. He won't remember any of this. By the time he's old enough to ask questions, Harold will be in some retirement home somewhere, and we'll be living in Monaco or somewhere warm. I stood in the bathroom, hands braced against the sink, hearing every word. My daughter and her husband, laughing about destroying me, planning to ship me off to a retirement home while they fled the country with my life's work. I splashed water on my face, took 3 deep breaths, and returned with a smile. Everything all right, Dad? Christine asked, that familiar sweet concern in her voice. Perfect. Sweetheart, just perfect. I played the doting grandfather for the rest of the evening, reading Lucas a bedtime story before they left. When I hugged Christine goodbye at the door, I whispered, I love you. She smiled. I love you too, Dad. The words felt like glass in my throat. After they left, I played the recording again. Martin's voice filled my empty house. Harold deserves this. He threw away people like they were nothing. I had my confirmation. Every word recorded, time-stamped, crystal clear. Monday morning, I arrived at the RCMP detachment in Vancouver with Thomas Whitfield and a folder of evidence. Corporal Jennifer MacDonald listened for 2 hours as I explained everything. Mr. Pemberton, this is substantial. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. We'll need time to build a proper case, but based on what you've shown me, we have grounds to proceed. What about the retirement ceremony on Saturday? We'd prefer if you continued as planned. Let them think they've succeeded. We'll coordinate with your attorney to switch the documents back to the legitimate versions without their knowledge. Once they sign, they'll have committed fraud in front of witnesses. And then we make arrests. I signed a revised will on Wednesday, leaving my entire estate to the Margaret Pemberton Foundation for Youth Education, named after my late wife. Christine would inherit nothing. The Muskoka cottage would be sold, and the proceeds donated to scholarships for first-generation university students from rural communities. I called Sandra Okonkwo that evening. Sandra, I owe you an apology. 18 years ago, I didn't listen when you tried to tell me the truth about James Whitmore. I was wrong. Thank you, Mr. Pemberton. That means more than you know. Call me Harold. And I want you to know, I've contacted the professional accounting associations and provided evidence clearing your name. You should receive formal notification of your exoneration within the month. She was quiet for a long moment. I spent 18 years being known as a thief. I lost my marriage, my friends, my self-respect. And now, because I chose to warn you instead of letting Martin finish what his father started, I get my name back. You could have stayed silent. You could have let them destroy me. Why didn't you? Because revenge and justice aren't the same thing. James Whitmore wanted revenge on you, and he passed that poison to his son. But I wanted justice. There's a difference. Saturday morning, October 18th. The retirement ceremony was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the Fairmont Hotel, Vancouver. 200 guests, business partners, industry colleagues, family friends, all there to celebrate the transition of Pemberton Forestry Solutions to the next generation. I arrived early, checking every detail. The RCMP had officers positioned discreetly around the room. Thomas Whitfield had secretly swapped the documents back to the original versions, the ones that retained my 40% ownership with restrictions on resale. Martin and Christine had no idea. Guests began arriving at 5:30. I shook hands, accepted congratulations, played the proud father, preparing to hand over his legacy. Then I saw Martin's face when he noticed something off. He pulled Christine aside, whispering urgently. I watched them check their phones, exchange worried glances. Something had gone wrong in their plan, but they couldn't figure out what. At 6:30, after dinner and speeches from various colleagues, the moment came. And now, the Master of Ceremonies announced, Harold Pemberton will officially transfer leadership of Pemberton Forestry Solutions to his daughter, Christine Pemberton Chen. I stood and walked to the podium. Christine and Martin joined me, both wearing careful smiles. I looked out at 200 faces, family, friends, business partners, who had trusted me for decades. Thank you all for being here tonight. 43 years ago, I arrived in Vancouver with $200 in a dream. Today, Pemberton Forestry Solutions operates in 5 provinces and employs over 400 people. I paused. But I didn't build this company alone. I built it with the help of dedicated employees, loyal partners, and a family I thought I could trust. The word thought hung in the air. I saw Christine stiffen. Before I sign these documents, I want to talk about something important. I want to talk about trust and betrayal. Martin's smile froze. 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call from a woman named Sandra Okonkwo. Some of you may remember her. She worked as my head accountant for 15 years before I fired her in 2007. I believed she had helped another employee embezzle from my company. I paused. I was wrong. Sandra was innocent. She was framed by the real embezzler, a man named James Whitmore. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. James Whitmore served 4 years in prison for his crimes. He died in 2015. But before he died, he told his son that I had ruined their family unfairly. He convinced his son that I was the villain who needed to be punished. I turned to look directly at Martin. His son's name was Martin Whitmore. He legally changed it to Martin Chen in 2012. The room went silent. My son-in-law has spent the last 8 years executing a revenge plan conceived by his father. He targeted my daughter, dated her, married her, and spent the last 5 years working inside my company, all with one goal: to steal everything I built and leave me with nothing. Martin's face had gone white. Christine grabbed his arm. I have documented evidence. I held up a folder. Altered share transfer agreements designed to give them 100% ownership instead of the 60% I'd agreed to. A shell company called Northern Heritage Holdings registered to both of them, which has already negotiated a sale of Pemberton Forestry Solutions to a foreign conglomerate for $47 million, roughly half its actual value. And a recording made in my own home 4 days ago. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Martin's voice filled the silent ballroom. Harold deserves this. He threw away people like they were nothing. My father, that accountant Sandra, anyone who threatened his precious company. Now it's his turn to be thrown away. Then Christine's voice. 10 more days, and this is all ours. I stopped the recording. 200 people stared at my daughter and her husband in horror. The documents you see on this table are the original share transfer agreements. The ones that correctly reflect a 60% transfer to Christine, with restrictions on resale and requirements for my approval on major decisions. I paused. I have already signed them. If my daughter signs them as written, she will receive exactly what we originally agreed upon. However, the RCMP is also here tonight. I nodded toward Corporal McDonald, who stepped forward with 3 other officers. Martin Chen, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Christine Pemberton Chen, you are under arrest for fraud and conspiracy. The room exploded. Martin tried to push through the crowd toward the exit, but 2 officers blocked his path. Christine stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Dad, she whispered. Dad, please, I can explain. You had 8 years to explain. You had every opportunity to tell me the truth. Instead, you chose to help your husband steal from me. My voice cracked. You're my daughter. I would have given you anything if you'd just asked honestly. But you chose to take. They led Christine and Martin away in handcuffs. I watched my only child, my daughter, escorted out of her own father's retirement celebration like a criminal. Because that's what she'd become. After the chaos settled, I asked for everyone's attention one final time. I want to apologize for the disruption to what should have been a celebration. I also want to announce that the transition of Pemberton Forestry Solutions will not proceed as planned. I will remain as CEO for the foreseeable future, with a search for my successor to begin immediately. I looked around the room at faces I'd known for decades. I also want to announce the creation of the Margaret Pemberton Foundation for Youth Education. In lieu of the family inheritance I'd originally planned, my entire estate will eventually be donated to provide scholarships for first-generation university students from rural and indigenous communities across Canada. Applause, though muted and uncertain, rippled through the crowd. And one final thing. Sandra Okonkwo, the woman who called to warn me about this conspiracy, spent 18 years being known as a thief when she was innocent. I have submitted evidence to clear her name, and I want everyone here to know that she is one of the most honest and courageous people I have ever encountered. When she had every reason to let me suffer the same fate her family suffered, she chose truth over revenge. That is a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I drove home alone that night. The Vancouver lights sparkled in my rearview mirror, beautiful and cold. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Christine, calling from the police station. I didn't answer. I thought about Lucas, my 4-year-old grandson, who was now going to grow up visiting his mother and father in courtrooms and possibly prisons. He'd ask questions someday. What would I tell him? I thought about Margaret, who would have handled all of this with more grace than I ever could. She would have been heartbroken, but she would have known what to say, what to do. I just felt hollow. When I got home, I went straight to my office and pulled out the Muskoka cottage deed, $1.2 million. I'd bought it as a gift for my daughter, a way to give her something beautiful to start this new chapter. Now it felt like a monument to my own blindness. I called Sandra Okonkwo one more time. Sandra, it's Harold. I wanted to thank you again. How are you holding up? I'm not sure yet. I keep replaying everything in my head. All the signs I missed. All the conversations that should have raised red flags. Don't do that to yourself. People who love us have a unique power to deceive us because we want to believe the best in them. Can I ask you something? When you found out what Martin was planning, you could have just let it happen. After everything I did to you, letting me lose everything would have been a kind of justice. No, her voice was firm. That's not justice. That's revenge. And I spent 18 years watching what revenge did to James Whitmore and his family. It ate them from the inside. Martin grew up in that poison, and now look where it's led him. She paused. Justice heals. Revenge only spreads the wound to more people. I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. You do. You felt it tonight, You had every opportunity to destroy your daughter completely. You could have made this public in ways that would have ensured she never recovered. Instead, you gave her the chance to face consequences through the legal system, with dignity and due process. That's justice. I hung up and stared out my window at the city I'd spent 43 years building a life in. The same city where my daughter had been booked into custody, where my grandson was probably confused and scared with his grandmother tonight, where my entire legacy had nearly been stolen by a man who blamed me for his father's choices. Sunday morning, I drove to the cemetery where Margaret was buried. I sat on the bench beside her headstone for nearly an hour, talking to her the way I used to when she was alive. I don't know if I did the right thing, I told her. Part of me thinks I was too harsh. Part of me thinks I should have found another way. But she was going to take everything we built together, Margaret. Everything. A breeze rustled the leaves on the maple tree above her grave. I took it as her answer, even though I wasn't sure what the answer was. I keep thinking about what you would have done. You were always better at forgiveness than me. You would have found some way to reach Christine before it got this far. I wiped my eyes. Or maybe not. Maybe some betrayals are too deep. Maybe some choices can't be undone. I sat there until the groundskeeper came by at noon, then drove to my office. There were calls to make, damage to control, a company to reassure. But first, I wrote a letter. It was to Lucas, my grandson. I dated it for his 18th birthday, 14 years from now. I told him about his grandmother Margaret, about building the company, about the joy I felt when he was born. I told him that his parents had made choices that hurt people, including him, but that those choices didn't have to define him. I told him that I would always love him, that the foundation I'd created would provide opportunities for young people like him to build better lives than the ones they'd inherited. I told him that revenge is a poison that kills everyone it touches, and that I hoped he would choose a different path than his father had. I sealed the letter and put it in my safe beside Margaret's wedding ring. Then I went back to work. That's my story. And if you're listening to these stories on Golden Vengeance, here's what I need you to understand. I spent 43 years building something meaningful from nothing. I thought I was building a legacy for my family. What I was really building was a test of character, of loyalty, of what kind of people my loved ones would become when given the opportunity to choose between honesty and greed. My daughter failed that test. Her husband brought the poison of his father's revenge into my home, and she drank it willingly. But Sandra Okonkwo passed a test I didn't even know I had given her. 18 years ago, I treated her unfairly. I didn't listen when she tried to tell me the truth, and when she had the chance to let me suffer the same fate, she chose truth over revenge. That's the first lesson. Revenge and justice are not the same thing. Revenge spreads pain to more and more people. Justice tries to heal by holding people accountable while still leaving room for redemption. The second lesson is harder. You cannot control what other people do, only how you respond. I could have responded to this betrayal by scorching the earth, by destroying my daughter's reputation so thoroughly that she could never recover. I didn't. I let the legal system do its work. I protected my company and my employees, and I made sure Lucas would have opportunities even if his parents couldn't provide them. The third lesson is the hardest of all. Sometimes love isn't enough. I loved my daughter. I still love her, even now. But love without accountability becomes enabling, and enabling betrayal makes you complicit in your own destruction. You can love someone and still hold them responsible for their choices. In fact, that might be the deepest form of love there is. Some of you watching might be dealing with your own family betrayals. Maybe it's not as dramatic as what I experienced, but the pain is just as real. My advice is this: protect yourself, demand accountability, but don't let revenge consume you. The people who betrayed you have already taken something precious. Don't let them take your integrity too. And if you're on the other side, if you're the one who's been tempted to betray someone who trusted you, ask yourself, is this who I want to be? Is this the legacy I want to leave? It's not too late to choose differently. It's not too late to be honest. I'm 68 years old now. I eat dinner alone most nights. My daughter is awaiting trial, and my grandson is being raised by his other grandmother while his parents' lives fall apart. I won every battle, but I lost the war for my family. That's the cost of being right sometimes. But I still believe justice matters. I still believe truth matters. And I still believe that when someone gives you the chance to do the right thing, even when you don't deserve it, you should take that chance and pass it on to someone else. Sandra Okonkwo gave me that chance. Now I'm trying to pass it on to Lucas, and to every young person who benefits from the Margaret Pemberton Foundation. That's how we break the cycle of revenge. That's how we build something better than what we inherited. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I know these aren't easy stories to hear. If my story moved you, or if you have your own experiences with family betrayal or difficult choices, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed to Golden Vengeance yet, please consider joining our community. These stories matter, and your support helps us keep telling them. One more thing. The stories you hear on this channel contain fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. They're meant to teach, to warn, to inspire thought. If that's not for you, that's perfectly okay. But if you're staying, welcome. Let's learn from each other's experiences together. God bless.